Ray left us with the singularity, which brings us to Professor Frank Tipler, who, as an astrophysicist, has spent many decades studying the singularity as well as many other astrophysical phenomena. And Professor Tipler authored a book several years ago, The Physics of Immortality, which laid out a very clear and comprehensible roadmap for the possibilities of immortality, not grounded in religion or in spiritualism, but in solid math and physics. He also took the extra step of showing that a lot of the stories, to use Natasha's very nice phrase, that religions and faiths have brought us are not inconsistent with the bottom line, if you will, of the physical reality. Professor Tipler has continued to further develop his work in this field, and we're very fortunate to, I believe, be the first audience to receive some of his most recent thinking and calculations and research on this, in this field. And it's with really great pleasure I'd now like to welcome to the podium Professor Frank Tipler to speak on the subject of the physics of immortality, threats to Terran society, and self-replicating nanotechnology, and in particular to talk about why the universe's acceleration must stop if life is to survive forever. Dr. Tipler.
Thank you, Martine. What I'm going to basically do is take off from where Ray stopped this morning. He carried us to the next few decades. I'm going to try to carry us through the rest of universal history. Now, the essence of immortality, of course, is we live forever, having an infinite number of experiences. But the first person to actually consider whether that's possible, literally carry life infinitely far into the future, was Freeman Dyson. Now, Freeman Dyson was worrying about how life could exist in an ever-expanding universe. I wondered if it's possible to have life continue to exist in a universe which expands to a maximum size and recontracts after a finite time into a final singularity. I concluded, and this is the essence of what I worked out in my book, The Physics of Immortality, is it is possible for that to occur in a closed universe that behaves as I've described it. Now, a shock for me was the experimental results. I think they're absolutely solid experimental results from the late 1990s, showing that the universe is not slowing down, as my theory required, but is actually accelerating. Now, interestingly enough, an accelerating universe will also be completely lethal to Dyson's theory, not only in my theory, because in Dyson's theory, life, in order to exist, has to expand and engulf more and more matter to base its actual systems on. Now, in my version, I also have, so to speak, going to infinity, but I have life engulfing and taking control of the entire closed universe. Now, if the acceleration of the universe were to continue at its present rate, all the galaxies outside the local group of galaxies, the only galaxy besides the Milky Way galaxy of large size is the Andromeda galaxy, all of the galaxies out there which we now see will eventually, in such a scenario, an unlimited, continually accelerating universe, eventually pass outside our event horizon, and then, because of lack of resources to build life on, life will inevitably die out. And it doesn't matter. You get nailed, whatever type of universe you're in, open, flat, or closed. Nothing we can do if the acceleration were to go on forever. Now, if life, therefore, is to exist forever, somehow this universal acceleration which we now observe must be halted. Remarkably, the standard model of particle physics actually provides a mechanism, and the same mechanism to stop the acceleration provided by the standard model of particle physics also explains why there is actually more matter in the universe than antimatter. This process is unfortunately restricted mainly to particle physicists. It has various names. I'm going to call it in this talk electroweak quantum tunneling. In the literature, you can generally call it Schweleron action. A more complicated word, actually in apropos, so another, besides being complicated, I'm not going to really use that term. Now, according to the standard model of particle physics, now I should emphasize for people who are not familiar with that theory, that this is the model that explains everything except for gravity. That's been the standard theory in physics for about 30 years. Now, since you get an automatic Nobel Prize if you refute this theory, all particle experimenters are out there trying to refute it, to conduct experiments showing it's wrong. They have failed to date. So I'm fairly confident, I would go so far as to say very confident, that we can actually trust this theory. Okay, what does it tell us? It tells us that the universe's acceleration is due to a positive cosmological constant, which is actually there in the equation, Lagrangian actually, for quantum gravity, and it's slightly larger in magnitude than the Higgs field negative energy density. Now, those of you who are not connoisseurs of the standard model, you probably never even heard of the Higgs field. The Nobel laureate Leon Lederman calls it the God particle, the Higgs field, because, so to speak, it's the most important particle in the standard model. One of the things it does is give rise to mass of all the particles, including itself, and also it's responsible for splitting the electroweak force into the electromagnetic force on the one hand and the weak force on another. Extremely important particle, so the calling it the God particle is somewhat apropos. Okay, now, in order for this process to work, the Higgs field has to have an enormous energy density in the present environment. And it's a negative energy density, something of the order of 10 to the 30th grams per cubic centimeter. For comparison, human body, 1 gram per cubic centimeter, center of the Earth, maybe 10 grams per cubic centimeter. Think 10 to the 30th larger than that. Obviously nothing like that is around. It is according to the standard model. We're just not aware of it. So it must be almost canceled out to 1 part in 10 to the 50th. Now, the standard model says this other thing has to be the positive cosmological constant. Now, if no matter existed, then these two, positive cosmological constant and an effective cosmological constant of opposite sign from the Higgs field, would precisely cancel. The standard model tells us that matter was created in the early universe by this process that I have described, mainly aware only to particle physicists, and the result of this electroweak tunneling, as I've called it, is to cause us to be in what is occasionally called a false vacuum, which actually raises the Higgs energy density higher than the negative value it would actually be. Now, therefore, let's think about the implications of this standard model picture of why there is more matter than antimatter in the universe. If we were to reverse this process by matter annihilation, say by the reaction, this is allowed in this process, a proton plus an electron goes to 2 photons, written gamma. Now, I should mention in passing that the standard model says in this particular process, baryon number, which I've called B, is not conserved. Lepton number, which I've called L, is not conserved. In other processes outside of this, these are very good conserved quantities. But B minus L is conserved. Now, in this reaction I have written here, P plus E, proton is a baryon. It has plus 1 unit of baryon number. The electron is a lepton. It has plus 1 unit of lepton number. So, on the left-hand side of the reaction, We have +1, -1, which is 0. No leptons or baryons, so this process can go. Okay, now, if this process were to go, if you were to annihilate, say, hydrogen atoms to give you pure energy, then the Higgs field would relax to its true minimum, and that would stop the acceleration. Now, what I find is really interesting is I think reasons can be given to think this process is actually accessible to human technology, or perhaps I should be somewhat more general, human download AI technology in the relative near future. And I have described in outline how these ideas might be tested in a recent paper I have published. And I think our distinguished host deserves a real reprint of that. Now, if this process works, then what it will provide is not only will it allow us to stop the universal acceleration, it will provide us with an ultimate energy source, because what is now holding up generation of energy is conservation of baryon and lepton number. Consider nuclear reactions. Consider a fusion reaction. 4 protons go into 1 helium-4 nucleus. We can get out 0.7% of the rest energy of the 4 protons. We cannot get out more than that because baryon number forms a barrier to doing that. This process goes beyond conservation of baryon number, again allowed by the Standard Model. It will allow us to convert matter entirely into energy, and that would provide an ultimate energy source, much beyond what we now have. Now, interestingly, we can go further than that. This process, proton plus an electron, goes into a neutrino. Antineutrino is also allowed, because as I've already told you, the left-hand side, P plus E, has 0, B minus L. On the other side, a neutrino has +1 unit of lepton number, -1 unit of lepton number. Add the two, you'll find again you get 0. So, 0 lepton number on the right-hand side, 0 B minus L on the other side. 0 equals 0, perfectly good, I think. So this process is already allowed. Now, also allowed. Now, suppose we do this. Let's think about the implications of being able to create a directed neutrino beam by annihilation of matter into the neutrinos. If you can do this, convert it into a beam of neutrinos, you actually have an ultimate rocket. What do you need for a rocket? You need to have the exhaust gas to be as high a speed, highest velocity as possible. You can't do better than light speed. Neutrinos have so little mass they are very close to light speed. But also in a rocket, one of the problems you run into is the exhaust gases tend to burn things up. That's one of the reasons we never developed a nuclear rocket. Dyson was one of the people working on such a device in the 1950s. We never developed one because think about what the exhaust gas would be. It would be highly radioactive and also very hot. It would vaporize whatever it hit. Think about a rocket launch from Cape Kennedy. The exhaust gases from rockets are so vast that people have to stand back a mile from the launching range. But if you've got an exhaust which, like neutrinos, is non-interacting, you can have the rocket basically go off in this room. It would have no effect on anybody. That would give you, in other words, this process, an ultimate rocket. The other process also should be allowed by the Standard Model via this electroweak quantum tunneling, will provide the ultimate energy source. Now, I'm going to make a prediction. In this century, I think actually close to Ray's estimate of 2040, because the basic barrier to making the process that I have described practical is essentially the same barrier that's preventing us from making a practical quantum computer, which I think everyone is aware is going to be a vastly more powerful computer than a classical computer. I'm going to predict that we're going to obtain in this century ultimate power source, the ultimate rocket, which I've described, artificial intelligence, nanotechnology. People much more competent than myself have already gone over that. Human downloads, and of course, as I've already mentioned, quantum computers. I'm going to argue that AIs and human downloads, not flesh of course, but human downloads and artificial intelligences are going to use this power to expand off the Earth and eventually gain control of the entire universe. Now, I throw in a word here none of you besides myself have probably ever heard of, unitarity. All right, unitarity requires it. It's one of the fundamental principles of quantum mechanics. I will argue that unitarity is going to conclude with, if the laws be for us, who can be against us? Now, that's how I'm going to answer Ray's objection about constraints of these super intelligent machines overcoming us. Ultimately, the laws of physics will keep them in line. That you cannot repeal the laws of physics. Even super intelligent machines can't handle that, but they will not want to, because if the laws of physics are going to enable them, indeed require them, to take over the universe, increase their power without limit, with the power becoming total and infinite at the final singularity. Thank you.
I'm sure there are some questions.
Well, whether or not the speed of light is a limit is very important. If it's not a limit at all, you and I discussed some of the limits of how much intelligence can be infused in a square meter of matter, or cubic meter of matter. And ultimately, we will saturate the matter and energy in our vicinity, whatever those limits may be, and then expand out from there. I've estimated in here that we could harness 10 to the 90th calculations per second with the known matter in the universe. But how long would it take us to actually transmit those processes and transform the universe into sublime and intelligent matter and energy? The speed of light comes up prominently.
Yes, here you should have read my book.
If it's not a limit, then we can actually do it in a small number of centuries. If it is a limit, then it'll take billions of years. So there's some speculations. Wormholes that we could engineer. Wormholes that may already be there. Hochberg and Thomas Kephart point out shortly after the Big Bang, gravity was strong enough to have provided the energy created to spontaneously create a large number of self-stabilizing wormholes that might still be around.
If that were true, this process wouldn't work.
And then there's also some experiments that need to be confirmed, that have been criticized but have not been disproven, showing possible actually change in the speed of light over the last 2 billion years, differing by 4.5 parts out of 10 to the 8th. But presumably if that has happened, it's not just because time has gone by, some conditions have changed. And if there's subtle conditions that have changed, that opens the door enough for engineering to actually amplify those conditions. There's suggestions during the period of inflation, the speed of light was different. Again, presumably because of different conditions that we could then engineer. So there's many different suggestions of ways of either circumventing the speed of light by finding shortcuts through wormholes, or alternatively, actually engineering changes in the speed of light. The universe apparently, as it's expanding, you can actually identify galaxies that are moving away from each other at greater than the speed of light. That actually does not allow you to transmit information faster than the speed of light. So that exception doesn't actually help you very much. Anyway, I've mentioned a number of suggestions of overcoming the speed of light. So I was wondering, Yuri. about your reaction to that?
Well, two answers. First of all, those suggestions definitely contradict the laws of physics as they're not understood. These people are aware of it. They know they're inventing new laws of physics. I propose something different. Rather than violate or find new laws of physics, I propose we transcend the speed of light barrier. There is a way to do that in the context of relativity itself, and that's what I describe in some detail in my book, The Physics of Immortality. To some extent, I repeat it in that article. The game is, you can't do it instantly. We have to realize that we have to use the universe itself to transcend the light barrier. What I show, this is just standard general relativity. If you can control the rate of collapse of the universe, and there are mechanisms which are known to exist in general relativity to do precisely that, what you can do is transcend the light barrier by allowing, in this context alone, an infinite number of translations of a light ray moving on at light speed back and forth across the universe in finite proper time. That can be done. If you would like, I'll show you the mathematics. It's very simple right after this lecture. I didn't want to go into the mathematics of that here, but it's fairly straightforward in general relativity. But what you have to do is use general relativity cleverly rather than trying to find new laws. The laws of physics, as we now understand them, will allow us to transcend the light barrier, although not in the universal expansion phase. Only in the collapsing phase can it be transcended.
A couple of comments. I mean, some of the recent papers on wormholes suggest they are consistent with the laws of physics.
I know they're not, because that theorem was proven by Bob Garrosh about 40 years ago. Unfortunately, many of the younger people are not aware of global general relativity. I didn't prove it, he did.
What about inflation?
You don't need inflation. There is no mechanism for inflation in the standard model. You don't need it because standard laws of physics, quantum mechanics, allows you to get everything that inflation does automatically just using known physical law. Inflation involves a new field called the inflaton, which has never been seen in the laboratory. Using fields that have been seen in the laboratory, but using them more cleverly than has been done in the past, you can get all the observations easily explained and make some new predictions. I give away, for example, a very simple experiment to test these things. An expert could do it inside of 6 months. The material cost would be less than $1,000. I went so far as to actually find where you could buy the necessary parts and put it in the paper. So I've gone one step further than theorists generally go for experimentalists.
Other step is you could build them.
Unfortunately, I'm not an expert in microwave technology. If you've ever done experiments, and I know you have, it requires time to develop the necessary experimental techniques. I estimate it would take me 5 years to learn those techniques. Hundreds of people, if not thousands of people, exist out there who have those techniques at their fingertips.
Mike has the next question.
Yeah, actually, two things that follow up on Ray's. One is I'm trying to understand if there is sort of a sense of urgency in order to catch the expanding universe. I mean, you said that there is the dark energy that is pushing the universe out faster.
Yes, positive cosmological constant,
Right.
according to the standard model.
Right. And is there a point at which we reach a point of no return? In other words, we wait too long and get so far.
Yes, there would be such a time.
Right.
But see, people who are not physicists, and I regret to say even most physicists, do not fully appreciate what the word unitarity means. You probably never even heard of that word. It appeared, I think, you may have heard it in a different context, the black hole information problem. You may have heard Stephen Hawking gave this dramatic talk at the Dublin conference last year, in which, if you look at what he actually says, and if you knew Stephen Hawking's previous history on this, he has been arguing for 30 years that unitarity could be violated. Particle physicists, also me, have disbelieved this because unitarity is such a fundamental principle. He basically capitulated at this point. What is unitarity? One of its, if you look in the textbooks, and I think the textbooks are accurately describing it, what it really says is, put it in dramatic form, the ultimate future is controlling what's happening now. Or put it another way, you can think equally, we normally think of past to future causation. Unitarity says it's equally appropriate to think of the ultimate future controlling what's happening now, i.e. ultimate future to present causation. Counterintuitive to human beings, but my point is, unitarity is going to force us, or more precisely our descendants, into taking the necessary steps before it's too late. This is a variant of my answer to Ray. It will be unitarity that will control, put limits on how bad these nasty intelligences can be.
One more nuts and bolts question. What's required to start the first P&E reaction that gives you unlimited energy and unlimited rocket?
There is a barrier between the between two nearby false vacua, which the two false vacua correspond to different numbers of baryons in the universe. Now, normally, the way you would try to think of it as a potential barrier. I hope you're familiar with the physics term potential value. It's what it basically is a hill you've got to go over. Now, the difficulty corresponds to the height of the hill. Now, the potential barrier is 10 TeV. That's 10 trillion electron volts. We've not been able to, by brute force, overcome that barrier in even our most powerful accelerators. The SSC might have come close had it ever been built. Now, we've never seen this process, in other words. We know there's some process that created more matter and antimatter in the universe. This is the only mechanism in the standard model that will actually allow us to get this game. Now, you can also quantum tunnel, so to speak. You don't have to go over the barrier. You can tunnel between this. Now, what effectively quantum tunneling really works. Now, here I'll have to go against the textbooks because the most recent textbooks on how quantum tunneling works is not as accurate as the textbooks in the 1920s. What happens is that our universe, so to speak, borrows the energy temporarily from other universes, concentrates it in ours, that gets us over the hump, then they return the energy. That's how it was predicted, that's how it's described in the 1920s textbook. That's actually more accurate than ours, because our textbooks confuse the issue by using a wave function that actually simplifies the calculations but contradicts the basic postulates of quantum mechanics. They didn't do that in the 1920s. They used the standard postulates of quantum mechanics. In essence, that's what you've got to do. That's why I called it quantum tunneling, to emphasize that what you need is a coherent state across the universes that allows you to concentrate the energy. But it's a coherent state, the lack of ability to form a coherent state amongst, say, 100 atoms, that prevents you from making a quantum computer. You solve the one problem, figuring out how to make coherence of the order of 10,000 atoms, you've got the problem solved, not only for the quantum computer, but for this process that will give P plus E.
Can we get away with destroying just half the universe?
Won't work.
Well, we have to destroy all the matter.
We have to destroy, well, it's a little bit more complicated, and I went into more description of this in an article I published in the International Journal of Astrobiology to talk get Barry's field here. The acceleration makes life a little bit more complicated because of the acceleration, the event horizons would basically, there is a barrier to actually covering the universe sufficiently fast to stop the acceleration universally. It has to be stopped universally. Now, therefore, following this logic, this process of annihilation of matter will have to start more or less the same time, by same time from a cosmologist in 1 trillion years or so, at different parts of the universe, under the control of independently evolved intelligent species. So to speak, we will be harmonized in our efforts by this ultimate future. Remember unitarity. Ultimate future, controlling within broad limits what's happening now. I believe in the laws of physics, it tells me, they tell me, the future is controlling what's happening now.
You should be Unitarian.
If causality is bidirectional, isn't that another way of saying that no information is created or destroyed, and that basically
Yes.
we're on a fixed track and not actually accomplishing anything?
Yes. Unitarity preserves the von Neumann entropy, to put it in technical terms. Now, strictly speaking, the way the second law of thermodynamics works, I think, I don't have this clear in my mind yet. What I think is we have some sort of guiding universes through the multiverse in which the second law increases, with the additional information, the negative information, being dumped into nearby universes. I don't know. I haven't been able to construct this explicit model of how that works. That would what would have to happen if the second law was going to be consistent with unitarity. Unitarity, another way of putting it, is the quantum mechanical version of determinism. That's basically what it is. It's usually described as conserving probabilities. What it really is a very powerful form of determinism. I like to say that quantum mechanics it's counter to what you will normally see in popular write-ups, but it's more deterministic than classical mechanics. It's one manifestation of that is that classical mechanics is chaotic, whereas quantum mechanics is not.
What do you think of hidden variable theories of quantum mechanics?
It contradicts quantum mechanics. There's no reason to stop with quantum mechanics. I see no evidence of quantum mechanics, anything but quantum mechanics. And as a matter of fact, has been realized independently by several people. One of the motivations for hidden variables is to get around non-locality. But actually, the arguments that non-locality even exists is really based on the assumption that quantum mechanics doesn't really apply to everything. Physicists, it's very frustrating to me, and to other people too. I've mentioned Dennis Sciama and David Deutsch, for example, will not apply quantum mechanics to human beings. I apply it to everything in sight. Quantum mechanics applies to the atoms making me up. It applies to the groups of atoms making me up. I think it applies to me too, because what else am I but an organization made up of atoms? Same thing for this house, same thing for the universe. But why would we want to have hidden variables? The laws of physics, as we now know them from the laboratory, give us all sorts of interesting ways to do things. As I said, you want to overcome the light barrier. General relativity already gives us a neat way of doing that by not having anything go faster than light, but nevertheless you get effectively the same thing as you're going into the final state. As I said, I can show you how the mathematics works. It's very simple. But you have to think about using these laws. Nature, fortunately, is cleverer than any human being. It's already used most of these effects, and will use the rest in the ultimate future.
Okay. I hope this isn't stupid, but if information can in fact escape a black hole, then if this universe is in a black hole, perhaps instead of us getting busy and collecting the information, it's escaping and we'll just evaporate and someone outside the black hole will collect us.
It's better to think of a single universe, a closed universe. Now, if the point is the same model that I've just described for transcending light speed basically says, strictly speaking, black holes don't exist. Because what you really see astrophysical black holes exist, no question about it. What you really, the point in science is to measure what you think you're measuring rather than sneak in assumptions that you're unaware of. Now, what we really see in making observations of astrophysical black holes is nearness to a trap surface. Basically, a trap surface is a sphere. Outgoing rays of light tend to be moved back into the interior, just as light from the inside of the sphere, of course, always goes toward the inside of the sphere. Now, it is a valid theorem that were trap surfaces to exist in an open universe or a flat universe or any universe that's infinite extent, then it has to be surrounded by event horizons. And you can't get the information across the event horizons. But that is a theorem which only applies to those universes. Remember, I've already said universe is closed. A closed universe can ignore that theorem. In a closed universe, what can happen, and I can give a completely general solution to the Einstein field equations that has exactly this property, is that in the present environment, light rays stick close to the trap surfaces. There is no way we can distinguish in current experiments from that situation, and light will never get out. But in a closed universe, what happens is that the light rays stay close to the trap surface until very close to the final singularity, then they get away. Right now, we cannot distinguish that situation from the open universe situation in our present measurements. The point is that in defining a black hole as a region where information never gets out, you have implicitly introduced a theory about the ultimate future of the universe. Here, I'm making explicit that I'm doing precisely that and showing how to get around that particular barrier. So in the model I've described, the black hole information problem simply doesn't exist because there are no event horizons. Astrophysical black holes exist, but no event horizon surrounding those things.
All right. Matt?
Yeah, I got a little question on practical eschatology. What view do you have of the idea of pocket universes, rather than trying to exist forever in our universe, to pinch off a new universe using the same processes you can?
Well, the pinching off I described in that paper would violate unitarity, because this is in essence Hawking's work, because they would basically have to be surrounded by event horizons in order to pinch off. But the event horizons would violate unitarity. So the boundary conditions of the universe are going to prevent you from doing that. But the thing to keep in mind is, why do you want to do that? Because in our own universe, without those pinched off universes, we can accomplish everything we wanted to accomplish by pinching off the universe.
That's what a backup plan, that's all.
Well, my point is, unitarity says we don't need a backup plan. If the laws be for us, who can be against us?
Well, then why should we even bother to do anything? I mean, if it's already been done, if the party...
It hasn't. Well, this is an interesting question that I would rather not discuss theological issues, which is in essence what you're bringing up. This is a question in Christian theology called free will versus foreknowledge. Predestination versus free will. If you like, the people who are not worried about that problem are going to be the people who are going to solve it. They're going to be the ones who are doing this. The universe is already planned for this. The people who give up, they won't make any contribution.
But they'll still, in your theory, exist for all eternity.
How so?
In the physics of immortality,
Yes.
when the final singularity approaches but never arrives, everything is infinite and eternal.
Well, remember that all I'm doing is using the known physical laws to show that there is a limited amount of complexity available in the whole of our closed universe. It's closed, so it's finite. The complexity is given by the Bekenstein bound, a result from quantum field theory. It shows you fundamentally at the quantum level how much complexity you can have. It's a finite number which you can compute. Now, as you're approaching the final state, the Bekenstein bound allows you to transcend this barrier which exists now. That you can, the Bekenstein bound allows an unlimited amount of information to exist in our particular universe. Now, in such a case, what you can do is emulate the present universe in the computers of the far future. So, as a computer emulation, we would be brought back into existence, never to lose existence again. That's technically feasible. I give in my book reasons why I think beings in the far future will actually do precisely that. So, the bad people, I will agree with you, will also be brought back into existence. But again, I don't want to talk about theological issues, which is what effectively you're raising. Let's talk about physics, technology we can do.